Hey, welcome back. This is Nehemiah Crash Course Part 2. We're going to be covering pages 140 to 142 in the outline, Roman numerals 1 and 2, and we're going to begin with something that was in your handouts, and that is going to be the first 11 verses of Nehemiah. We're going to kind of outline this first section and see all the stuff that it that it has to tell us. In our outline, on page 140, first part starts at the top with Nehemiah's return in chapters 1 and 2, and it says first paragraph handout. So what I want to do really quickly is just look at it, and then I'll flip it over to the page that you can fill in the blanks and talk about all the who, what, where, when, how, and why of the introduction to the book. So here we go. Nehemiah chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. The words of Nehemiah the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there, in the province who have survived the exile, is in great trouble and shame. The walls of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me, and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of the heaven, from there I will gather them, and bring them to the place that I have chosen, to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant, and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was the cupbearer to the king. And then the story goes from there. And it's pretty amazing after this prayer that you get this kind of matter-of-fact statement, I'm the cupbearer. So what Nehemiah does here in these first 11 verses is basically tells us everything that we're going to need to know about this book. We find out who's the author, or who at least are these words. Well, it's Nehemiah. What's his lineage? What's his family's? He's the son of Hakaliah. What are the contents of this book? These are the words of Nehemiah. And then we break it down in the second part of the first verse, and we see, now it happened in the month of Chislev in the 20th year. So we get the when in the Hebrew November, December. That's Chislev. 20th year of the king of Persia, while he was in the citadel of Susa. Susa is the winter palace of the Persian king. You get Hanani and others that they come from where? They come from Judah. So we got who, we've got what, we've got when, we've got where, and he has two questions. So you have a question and answer here in the first chapter. First of all, he has a question about the people, the Jewish remnant that survived the exile, and his other part of it, his question is about the place, about the city, about Jerusalem. The answer that they give to him, first of all, about the remnant, about those that survived the exile, those are the people. It says they are back in the province, but are in great trouble and disgrace. Secondly, about Jerusalem, the place, the walls of Jerusalem are broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. And so in response to the question and the answer that we see here in these verses, it says some things that he does. He hears these things, well, that the survivors are in great trouble and disgrace, and that the wall is broken down, the gates are burned with fire. And you get these two expressions. First of all, sitting down and weeping and mourning. That's expressing his feelings. And then secondly, in the fasting and praying that he does, what he does about it. How does he feel? And then what's his response? And it's the right response. That's good to see. And so we look at his prayer, and it involves several components. Verse 5 is adoration. Verses 6 and 7 is the confession of the sins of both the people and of his own family. 8 to 11 is the petition. He's going to go before the king and ask permission for something, and he wants God to grant him that. And then kind of that matter-of-fact statement, oh, by the way, I'm the cupbearer. And the cupbearer obviously has a special place. He's got privileges in the Persian Empire that nobody else has. He's the guy that tastes all the king's stuff, and he has to be trusted, so he's not going to poison the king. So this is a guy that has the king's ear, and he hopes that when he asks his question, that the king will do the thing that he's asking for. So the conclusion of that section ends with him saying, I'm the cupbearer. And his main concerns are both the people and the place. The people in great trouble and disgrace. The place, the walls are broken down and the gates are burned with fire. Again, remember, you can hit pause and you can scribble this stuff down, because I'm going to be moving along pretty quickly this time. Part B, Nehemiah then makes his return to Jerusalem. The king gives his consent, and he provides him with the tools that he needs, provisions, and he prays to God and goes and makes his request to the king. He does it in that order, and we see again that he is a man, first of all, of prayer, and then he is a man of action. He's going to pray to God for specific things, and he's going to see what God's going to do by trying stuff. When he gets there, you have opposition to the work. We're going to see there's these bad guys here. There's Sanballat the Horonite. He's a Samaritan. We've got Tobiah the Ammonite. Ammon is one of the nations that is against Israel all the time. And you have Geshem the Arab. And it says that they mock and despise the work that the Israelites are trying to do. Okay? So they're calling them names and stuff. And so Nehemiah is not threatened by these things. He's a pretty tough guy. He goes out to see what job they need to do. He goes and inspects the wall at nighttime. He gets on, I think, a donkey or a horse, and he goes and inspects all these gates and all the sections of walls between the gates. They said that the gates are burned down, and they say that there's holes in the wall. So he goes to see what the damage is to each of these gates all the way around the Temple Mount and the city of David, and it makes the entire circuit that night of the whole thing. Writes down all the details that he needs to know, where the problems are, and makes a plan for the next day. So moving on to page 141 at the top, when we get to the second section where we get the record of the walls being rebuilt. And first of all, we get a record of the builders. They each take responsibility for a section, and many of the times they're defending, or they're building up a section and defending a section of the wall that's close to where they live. And that makes sense, doesn't it? And then a quick little survey here. I'm going to just show you the verses really quickly, just go one right after the other, of opposition that we get from chapter 4. There's letters, conspiracies, blackmails, favors, mockings, and tauntings. Let me give you an example of this, starting in chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, Geshem the Arab heard of the work that's being done, and they jeered at us and despised us and said, what is this thing that you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we his servants will arise and build, but you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. Chapter 4, 1 through 11. When Sanballat heard that we were building the walls, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. There's a whole lot of jeering going on. And he said in the presence of his brothers in the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and burn the ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, yes, what they are building, if a fox goes up on it, he will break their stone wall. Hear our, O God, for we are despised. Turn back their taunt on their own head, and give them up to be plundered in the land where they are captives. Do not cover their guilt, and let not their sins be blotted out from your sight, for they have provoked you to anger in the presence of the builders. This is Nehemiah's prayer to God. It's an imprecatory prayer. So we built the wall, and all the wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. But when Sanballat, Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the repairing of the wall of Jerusalem was going forward, that the breaches were beginning to be closed, they were very angry, and they all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to cause confusion in it. We prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Again, you have prayer and action. In Judah it was said, the strength of those who bear the burden is failing. There is too much rubble. By ourselves we will not be able to rebuild the wall. They're feeling pretty downcast. And our enemies said, they will not know or see till we come among them and kill them and stop the work. So they're being threatened and cajoled and intimidated here and mocked. Now in chapter 6 we see the same guys, Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, and they try to draw out Nehemiah. You might want to pause and read down to verse 6. Now here we have verses 7 through 12. Go ahead and hit pause and read those. And then here we have verses 13 all the way down to verse 19. I'll scroll down just a smidge so you can see the bottom of verse 19. And this section, which has got to be one of my favorites in the book, after he's come back the second time, well, we'll see here in the passage. This is in chapter 13. Now before this, Eliashib the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of God, and who was related to Tobiah, prepared for Tobiah a large chamber, where they had previously put the grain offerings, the frankincense, the vessels, and the tithe of grain, wine, and oil, which were given by commandment to the Levites, singers, and gatekeepers, and the contributions for the priests. This is the same Tobiah from those other verses, the bad guy. While this was taking place, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I went to the king. And after some time I asked leave of the king, and came to Jerusalem. And I then discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah, preparing for him a chamber in the courts of the house of God, in the temple. And I was very angry. And I threw all the household furniture of Tobiah out of the chamber. Then I gave orders, and they cleansed the chambers, and I brought back there the vessels of the house of God, with the grain offering and the frankincense. So he had an apartment, basically, in the temple for this Samaritan, and Nehemiah's not going to put up with that at all. So back to page 141. Part C here is then what he's really good at, praying and fighting. And we saw there that both in Persia and in Israel, that this is what he's about. And this is probably my favorite part, where he just trusts in God and he doesn't back down, and he prays and prepares to fight. There's a saying that he takes up the sword and the trowel for making the walls, the sword for defending his territory, and he both prepares for both works, for the work of the building of the walls and the work of defending the walls as well. We see this principle at work here in chapter 4, verse 9. We pray to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. We see it again here in verse 12 and 13. At that time the Jews who lived near to them came from all directions and said to us 10 times, you must return to us. So in the lowest part of the space behind the wall and open places, I stationed the people by their clans with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And one more time we see the same kind of thing here in chapter 7. Now when the walls had been built and I had set up the doors, and the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites had been appointed, I gave my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the governor of the castle, charge over Jerusalem, for he was a more faithful and God-fearing man than many. And I said to them, let not the gates of Jerusalem be open until the sun is hot, and while they are still standing guard, let them shut and bar the doors. Appoint guards from them among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, some at their guard posts, and some in front of their own homes. He gave the people lots of incentive to defend these places because it had to do with their homes and their families. People were few. Houses hadn't been rebuilt, but the people did the job. And they did it because this man stood up and said, here's what we need to do in order to protect what God has given to us. So the sword and the trowel. Take up the sword and defend. Take up the trowel, rebuild that wall, but do it with confidence. Letter D, then we have some internal problems, and I will leave it up to you to go and read these passages. They're not terribly long, so you can take a moment to pause and take out your Bible and look at these. But the first one is in chapter 5, verses 1 through 13. The practice of usury is abolished. Usury is charging very high amounts of interest on loans. And it was something that was not allowed for Jews to do for other Jews in the law. So they're not to give interest loans to other countrymen. If they want to give a loan, they can, but not charge interest, because it's going to eventually enslave these people. And don't take away their inheritance. Part of the collateral that they would collect or people would put up in order to get these loans was their inheritance. And they're not following the 7-year cycle. They're not hitting the reset button and allowing the people to reclaim their territory, their inheritance land. This is in direct contrast to what's commanded to the people in Leviticus 25 and in Deuteronomy 15. You should probably read this and then read those to see how those things are connected. But Nehemiah knew this stuff and he confronted that. Moving to the last page here then at the top, I've listed 1, 2, 3, 4 other problems. You hit pause and copy these things down, and then I'll run you through them really quickly. You can see that all 4 of these occur in chapter 13 after Nehemiah has come back the second time. First of all, 13, 1 through 9, we have harboring evildoers and blackmailers. That's the situation with Tobiah and his apartment in the temple. 13 verses 10 to 14, you see that people are not tithing to support the Levites. Levites are going and getting other jobs. This is in direct contrast to what's commanded in Deuteronomy 12:19. We saw the same problem in the book of Judges. In verses 15 to 18, people are not honoring the Sabbath. They're coming in and trying to sell goods on the Sabbath day, in direct contrast to in the Ten Commandments, Exodus 20 verse 8, and in Deuteronomy 5, they're commanded to honor the Sabbath day and how to keep it holy. And then lastly, verses 23 to 26, they're marrying foreign women again. Foreign women must be like really attractive or something to Israelites, because they keep doing this. Direct contrast to what's commanded of them in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. Again, you should read these and you should read those to kind of see how all those things fit together. But I think the thing I appreciate most about the man Nehemiah is his leadership. He leads by example. He says, follow me, guys. I'm going to go do tough things. And whoever comes with me, you're going to grow. And he ends up doing things like saying things that need to be said. He confronts people. He does the thing where he throws the guy's stuff out of the apartment and commands people to go clean this place up. He does hard things like confronts people about their marrying of the foreign women. He tells them that they have to put their women away. All over the place, he's doing the hard things, and that's what good men do, and good people of God do. They do hard things because they know that's what God is asking of them. They know that that's the right thing to do. It's never wrong to do the right thing. Lastly, in this section, finishing up Roman numeral 2, we have a census and we have lists. We have lots of these things. You can hit pause again and write this stuff down. But we have lists of who built the wall, the nobles, the officials, the people, who are all searching out their genealogies, and some are excluded for lack of evidence. You can see that in chapter 7. You have the total amount of animals and people and gifts for the construction and finishing of the wall. You have those that signed a covenant to not go along with the foreign women and not to continue with usury, to obey what the law says to do. And we have here the list of people who voluntarily moved from the cities of Judea into Jerusalem to build up its numbers and to make it a more populous city. We have lists of overseers of the Levites. We have lists of the priests and the Levites who returned with Zerubbabel. We have a list of the chief Levites and their temple duties. And all this is in there to kind of give witness to the good and the bad. I think in the last book we saw the bad list, and here we get some of the good list, the people that were a part of this major work of securing the walls and protecting the people in Jerusalem. And they did an awesome job. They didn't have any starts and fits and stuff. They were able to complete the wall in 52 days. You're going to want to remember that number. That's pretty serious stuff, to finish the walls and the gates of a big city in 52 days. So that concludes this part of Crash Course in Nehemiah. The next part we're going to be looking at Roman numeral 3, and the conclusion should be a shorter video.